All right, so Katie, whenever we're ready with the live stream.
We're live.
All right, thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tullahoma. It is Sunday, August 1st, 2021. Welcome to those of you on Zoom, welcome to those of you live streaming, and welcome to those of you watching this on a recording. We will now start with our opening reading that Cass will read.
This reading is by Dr. Leo Buscaglia, who was a psychologist, leading edge thinker in death and dying. We never lose the people we love, even to death. They continue to participate in every act, thought, and decision that we make. Their love leaves an indelible imprint in our memories. We find comfort in knowing that our lives have been enriched by having shared their love.
And we'll now go to our chalice lighting.
Birth is a miracle of love and courage. It brings light into the world. Death is a loss of light, but no less an act of courage. For we are born from and return to mystery.
We now go to announcements. So I'll make the first one, that is that if you wish to contribute to the work of the church, you can send a check to P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma, 37388. I don't have any other announcements. I think we kind of covered everything earlier in the service. So other announcements. Yes, Chuck and then Tony.
Okay, two things real quick. First is the Thursday night discussion group will meet via Zoom on Thursday night at 7 o'clock. And if you would like to join us, we usually we watch a TED Talk and discuss it as an excuse for hanging out and chatting with each other. So if you would like to join us and you need a Zoom link, you can get it from me or Tony or Rick or Peter or Patty or Tom. Just a minute. Then the other announcement I wanted to make was the email COVID update that I just sent out. I had not done that in a long time. And part of the reason was after the last winter surge petered out and came down, and it looked like we were actually headed toward the end of this thing. It wasn't as urgent. And then once I got vaccinated, frankly, I kind of lost interest in as it was winding down and didn't really keep up. So I just wanted to say that now that things have changed, I'm going to try and send out at least a short update every couple weeks. And hopefully some of those updates will be that it's not as bad as I thought it would get. I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that. So anyway, that's that.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, Tony is next and then Rick.
Yeah, we had an emergency situation at the church where we had storm damage to a very large tree, and we had to have that cut down on Friday. All the limbs and everything have been removed. However, there are probably 6 or 7 large pieces of the trunk, very heavy, and part of the bid was to remove them. However, if anyone has an interest and wants these for firewood or anything, please contact me today. Otherwise, they will be removed. But it is usable wood for whatever you want. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Rick?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the Thursday night group set a new record. We went almost to 10 o'clock last time, so we really have a great time, and we invite anyone to participate. We look forward to every Thursday night. It's a high point in my life. I guess the other part of it is I want to thank Chuck. I've been watching his updates for months, and they're right on target. And I encourage everyone to take a look at what he has to say. You can understand what Chuck says because he kind of puts it on our level. Thanks again, Chuck.
All right, thank you, Rick. Other announcements? Yes, Gene?
I met with the board at the Tennessee Fine Arts Center Friday night, and we concluded that we are still going to go ahead with our next art display that starts on the 7th. But meanwhile, we're concerned that we may be forced to close by a mandate fairly soon. So I'd encourage everybody who would like to see the latest go as soon as you get a chance.
Thank you, Gene. Anything else? Other announcements? Yes, Carrie?
That's a photography show, right, Gene? Or not? Our speaker next Sunday will be Ricky Cruz, our own Ricky Cruz, and he's going to speak about the story of evolution. What a brave person.
All right. Is that it, Carrie?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements? All right, looks like we're moving on. So next we will do our responsive reading. And this is called The Sacred Thread by Heather Januels. They touch our lives time and again through their presence and their absence, through familiar scents and favorite songs, through old stories and renewed sorrow.
We reach back in gratitude and understanding without our time together and the pain and the joy. We would never be who we are today. We would have very little to pass on by ourselves.
Without fear, but with thanksgiving and with hope for all that awaits.
We remember those who have gone before. We honor the circle of life and death and our place within the sacred thread.
So we now move on to our speaker. So everybody, would you please mute if you haven't already done so, so you won't have unnecessary noises in the background. So our speaker is Katie Ford, and she's going to talk about her time in foster care and what that has meant to her and what she's learned from it. So Katie, it's all yours. And take as long as you need. We took 20 minutes up front. So if you go beyond 11 o'clock, that's fine. We'll cut in to talk back a touch, but don't feel you have to quit at 11.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm going to start just by saying that I've been having trouble writing this talk. I procrastinated on it until last week, and then all week I've been trying to write it. I mean, I wrote several drafts just trying to find the right words and the right tone for this. And I was hoping I'd hit that magic formula to make an amazing talk, but that never happened, so you get this one. When I was 15, I was miserable. Now, you've got to remember that my mom had died when I was 12, and that left just my father, my two older brothers, and me trying to run the house. I won't dwell too much on the specifics, but I want to give you an overall idea of who I was prior to foster care. I dressed loud. By this, I mean I dyed my hair green. I'd shaved my head at the beginning of 9th grade. So, it was still growing back when I went into foster care. I wore wide leg jeans that looked like two people could fit into each leg. And I'd wear an old army jacket that I'd pinned rainbow patches onto. I had safety pins in my pierced ears, and my shirts were always about 1,000,000 times too big. I had an attitude problem. It was a defense against the fact that I'd always been mocked by the more popular girls in middle school. So I just started assuming that everyone who I didn't know well was mocking me, and I responded in kind. That did once almost end up with a fist fight between me and some middle school girls when I was a freshman in high school. And more than anything, I was depressed. My home situation was trash. My father was an alcoholic, and Our house was in such bad shape that the Board of Health was telling us we had to clean it. If we wanted to eat, we had to order out fast food or get convenience store food. So finally, a couple of my friends convinced me to go to the Division of Youth and Family Services, or DYFS, and get help. One friend, Olivia, called in an anonymous tip, while my other friend, Mike, held my hand as I went to the vice principal of the school and laid out my home situation. And I ended that talk with the vice principal with, "Call DYFS, get me out of this house, or I will kill myself." Well, that got the wheels in motion. It was a Monday when the call was made, and on Friday of that same week, I was pulled out of school at lunchtime to go for a psychological evaluation due to the threat of killing myself. While waiting, I was informed that I was going to be going to a foster home that night, but hopefully in a couple of days, I'd be moving in with my aunt and uncle. So I sat waiting a long time before they finally did the evaluation. I think I wound up waiting about 6 hours, most of it in a room so small you could sit on the bed and touch the walls on either side. I joke that if you weren't crazy before the psychological evaluation, you were when you walked out of it. The evaluation itself was over very quickly. It amounted to just a few questions such as, do you ever hear voices that aren't there? Or do you ever think of hurting yourself? Somehow I kept myself from making smart-ass remarks, and I simply said no, because I knew the correct answer, the answer that wouldn't make me get committed. So then I was brought to my foster home, and I met my foster mom, Kathy. My only possessions were the clothes on my back and whatever I had in my backpack that day. I was shown to the room which was to be mine, told that my roommate was visiting her grandparents that weekend and so wouldn't be back until Sunday. And then I was brought back downstairs to eat some dinner, my first meal that day. Now I'm going to pause for a moment and tell you two important things to this situation. One, I was a vegetarian, and two, I was pretty openly bisexual. I didn't know at the time just how much trouble this would cause for me. So back to dinner. Somehow I got lucky and there was leftover Chinese food with tofu instead of meat. So I was able to eat something for the first time that day. And as I sat down, Kathy pulled out her Bible and started reading me passages about how homosexuality is a sin and sinners go to hell. Barely in this woman's house for 10 minutes, and already she's telling me that, I'm a bad person and that I'm going to hell. I was being told that a part of who I was is wrong and bad and that I should change myself. The next day we went clothes shopping, and DYFS gives you an initial clothing allowance of about $200, or at least that's how much it was in 1999. And keep in mind, I needed a whole new wardrobe. So one of my foster sisters was tasked with going around Kmart with me to make sure I picked appropriate clothes. Nothing that shows off my midriff, proper length pants, clothing that's appropriate for church. Even shopping at Kmart, $200 doesn't go very far when you need to buy entirely new clothes, including underwear, socks, everything. But you get a clothing allowance each month, I'm sure people are saying. Well, yeah, I looked it up while writing this talk. In New Jersey, for someone 13 years or older, the current rate for a clothing allowance is about $3 a day. I don't know what the rate was in 1999, but that only calculates to about $90 a month. And my foster mom was known to hold on to that money until we needed it, and sometimes borrow money from it and have to pay us back. So I wasn't clothes shopping every month. That money was also used for doing things like buying gifts for others when it was their birthday or Christmas. It took 2 weeks after I was placed in foster care for me to return to school, due to school holidays for both the school I had been attending and the school that I would be attending. And this was 2 months before the end of the school year. So while some of my classes could be transferred easily, first year Spanish is first year Spanish pretty much no matter what school you're going to, others were not so easy. In my old school, I was taking environmental science. My new school did not offer environmental science, so they decided I would take physical science instead. I was feeling completely lost in this class. The teacher wanted us to do a project on one of the elements of the periodic table, but I didn't know what exactly he wanted in the report, how it was going to be graded, anything. And I didn't ask for help because it never occurred to me. I thought I just had to muddle through and do my best. There was one day in this class where it was maybe 30 seconds until the bell would ring to end class. Some of my classmates were putting their books away, so I started to put mine away as well. This caused the teacher to blow up on me, screaming about how I don't put my books away until he tells us to, and the bell doesn't dismiss the class, he dismisses the class. I'm scared and crying, and he took great offense to this, and he hauls me down to the guidance office, where he proceeded to yell and scream about how poorly I was doing in his class. And to be honest, I don't remember what exactly he was saying because I was just sobbing. I was so scared. Here's this man, twice my size, screaming at me. His face is red. And the guidance counselors just, I told you, if you had any issues with Janet, just talk to me. Certain allowances have to be made due to her situation. And yes, I'm going to be referring to myself by my birth name, which is a name I don't go by anymore. But that teacher never seemed to understand why I was struggling in his class. Yeah, it was a tough situation. This teacher just didn't seem to get that, I had gone through a major life change and was going to struggle. He took it as a personal offense. Now, I told you about Kathy preaching to me as soon as I entered her house. Well, it wasn't just her preaching at me. The youngest girl in the house, Em, who was 4 years old, would also preach at me. The morning after I went into the home, Em came into my room and asked if I have Jesus in my heart. She told me Jesus doesn't like girls who like girls, but he would forgive me if I asked him to. And then she started singing Jesus Loves Me and wanted me to join in with her. And every day she would ask me if I have Jesus in my heart. This, combined with the fact that I wasn't even allowed to be in the same room as another girl with the door closed, or even sleep in the same room as another girl, this was getting very tiring, very quick. So finally, one day in July, when the youth group was at some Christian concert in the park type thing, when they did an altar call, I went forward. All I wanted was to make peace and live a somewhat normal life. If they wanted me to be a Christian, then fine, I'd become a Christian. Sure enough, this would make things settle down. I wasn't forced to sleep in another room during the week anymore. I wasn't being preached at constantly anymore. Life was able to become a little bit more normal. Well, if I was going to be a Christian, I was going to do it with all my being and prove what a good person I was. I started waking up early to read my Bible before school. I'd become a more active member of the youth group and even take on a student leadership role. For 11th grade, I begged to attend the private school attached to the church we attended. I did everything in my power to prove what a good Christian I was, and therefore what a good person I was. Along with this, perhaps 6 months after going into foster care, I gave up on being a vegetarian. After all, it was such a problem not eating meat. It made things so hard for my foster mom to have to come up with meals that could be made both vegetarian for me and normal for everyone else. So to not make waves, I gave up on being a vegetarian. I mean, it made things so much easier. Why not change just to make life in the house better for everyone? The lesson that I learned from all of this, you need to change yourself to make everyone else around you happy. It's another way of trying to earn my foster mother's love and respect. When 10th grade started, I'd work really hard on my schoolwork. That year I was taking biology, and I discovered that I was pretty good at it. In fact, the teacher wanted me to switch from the basic biology class to the college prep class, which would be more challenging. My guidance counselor tried to talk me out of it. After all, it would mean having to change my whole schedule around, and I'd have to drop one of my electives. Couldn't that teacher just give me extra homework, and then at the end of the marking period, if he wanted to consider it college prep, then I'd get credit for it? But we fought for me to actually be a part of the college prep class. Who cares if my art class had to get moved from second period to fourth, or that I would be dropping the cooking class? Finally, he relented, and I started on the more difficult class, and I still excelled. I was asked to join the biology club after school, and after the school year ended, I got an award for excellence in biology. I finished the year with a 97.3 average for the entire year. You'd think my foster mom would be proud of me for this achievement, but it never got acknowledged. Similarly, the following year, when I was doing so well in American history class that the teacher would use my tests as the standard by which the other tests in the class were graded, and even read out my answer to a test question is the proper way to answer a short answer, Kathy never complimented me on my hard work or did anything to recognize how much I was trying to do well. Or when I entered a poetry competition and received a score that was just 1 point below moving on from the regional contest to state level, all the response that I got was, wow, that's a depressing poem. So when the next year I allowed my grades to slip, she was all over me about that, berating me, and on at least one occasion questioning my intelligence. When I submitted a more happy, positive poem to the competition and didn't do nearly as well, I simply threw away the participation award rather than bring it home to her and hear more negativity. So what did this teach me? People don't notice when you succeed, only when you fail. And of course, we all had chores to do around the house. Aside from keeping our rooms clean, we were also to pick a room of the house to keep clean on Saturday mornings. Now, remember that I told you that my father's house was a wreck? That didn't exactly teach me good cleaning habits. On more than one occasion, I didn't get things clean to Kathy's satisfaction, causing me to have to leave early from what I was doing to fix my mistakes. Like when I forgot to mop under a recliner, and so had to leave my friend's house early to correct that. Or when I had missed a tiny spot inside the toilet bowl, and so had to leave the senior class party early. Lesson learned? Only perfection is acceptable. Anything else, and you may as well have not tried at all. And as many of you know, I like having fun with my hair, cutting it, dyeing it, trying new hairstyles. Well, there was one time where we were having crazy hair day during school spirit week. One of my foster sisters, T, did my hair in little mini buns all over my head. Kathy took one look at it and told T that she shouldn't have done that. Everyone's going to make fun of Janet. He pointed out that another girl in our school had done a similar hairstyle recently, to which Kathy responded, but Janet isn't as popular as that girl, and you're simply setting her up to be laughed at. A few days later, when I took the buns out of my hair, leaving it looking super curly, Kathy once again decided to shame me. Oh, I heard the youth group is going to that new Christian coffee house tonight. When I didn't respond the way she expected, she pointed out how ridiculous my hair looked, once again saying I would get mocked by everyone for how my hair looked, and why would I go out in public looking like this? So what did I take away from this experience? How others perceive your appearance is what matters the most, and popularity matters in how people view you as a person. In 11th grade, when on a school trip to Colonial Williamsburg, I got a tiny taste of acting when we went to a storyteller and they asked for volunteers to act out the stories. Upon coming home, I joined the church's drama club as well as acting in the school's spring play. Kathy had encouraged me to audition to the play, saying it would be a good experience, even when I pointed out that I'd have to miss work or only work 1 day a week during the months that this would all be going on. As we got closer to the date of the play, Kathy berated me for the fact that I was only working 1 day a week. and tell me that I had to find my own ride home after rehearsals and get mad at how late I was coming home some nights. And she even tried to tell me she might not come see me in the play because you've told us everything, so why should we come see it? And in case you're wondering, the play was You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. So, you know, not exactly anything with a lot of depth to the plot. What this taught me was that you shouldn't be enthusiastic about things or try to share that enthusiasm with others. Similarly, I used to love singing, even though I know I don't exactly have an angelic singing voice. Kathy, and also she, would make remarks about my singing, such as, I know the Bible says to make a joyful noise unto the Lord, but I don't think noise was the operative word there. Or when the youth group went to a hospital to sing Christmas carols, she would tell me to go sing somewhere else as she was trying to cheer this patient up. This taught me that I should just keep quiet and not sing. And even to this day, the only time I sing is when I'm in the car with the volume so loud I can't even hear myself. When I turned 18, I opted to take the day off from work for my birthday. After all, it was the day I was becoming a legal adult, and I was hoping to get to see one of my brothers if he had the time for me. Kathy proceeded to tell me that in the real world, we don't take the day off for our birthdays. You don't see her taking off for her birthday, do you? She ran a daycare in the house. However, we were always on vacation when her birthday happened. So unless you want to consider being a foster parent work, but she made me feel so guilty about it that even now, almost 20 years later, I still don't ask off for work for my birthday. If I happen to have the day off, that's great, but I don't expect the day off. So what was the lesson to be learned here? Having time to yourself doesn't matter. You've got to always be productive and working. So I know you're thinking, wait, I thought you said you were supposed to go and live with your aunt and uncle. Yeah, that was the impression that I'd been given as well, but apparently my aunt decided that I was better off in foster care. She told me as much the day before I left for college. She was more than willing to, once a year for my birthday, take me out to dinner, a movie, and then to a bookstore to get whatever books I wanted. Isn't that so generous? And one of my brothers, Jay, who's almost 20 when I went into foster care, he had sworn to me that when he was 21 and had his own place to live, he'd take me in. Yeah, that never happened either. At first, I wasn't even allowed to see my father, my brothers, or my aunt. Then slowly, I was permitted supervised visits before finally being allowed unsupervised visits. Kathy was always willing to let me visit with Jay. After all, he was a good Christian boy. He kept his clothes nice and neat and his hair nice and neat. Or his visits with Dee were more trouble, since his past wasn't so good and he had, the long scraggly hair like you've seen on my boys. I remember on one occasion, Dee and I had gone and hung out for an afternoon and talked about the next day him coming over to the house and watching a movie, just hanging out at my house. Well, Kathy said no, I had already seen him and I wasn't going to be allowed to see him 2 days in a row. I came to find out later that when my aunt decided not to take me in, Dyfus then wanted all contact with my birth family cut off. They were pushing my family to try not to see or talk to me at all, and for my father to completely sign away his rights so I could be adoptable. The caseworker even went so far as to tell my father that it would be better for Janet to be allowed to forget all of you and move on with her life. Remember, I was 15, not 5. The takeaway from this being my feelings aren't actually to be considered. Other people get to decide what's best for me. When I went away to college, I still kept most of my possessions at Kathy's house. I still considered her my home, partly because where else was I going to go? And I thought that we were still on relatively good terms. After all, I tried so hard to be what she expected of me, to exhibit good Christian values. But apparently I didn't do as well as she expected. When I called her one day to tell her I'd gone to the ER that morning because when I'd been at church, I started trembling for no apparent reason, and so they'd called an ambulance for me, Kathy insisted that I come home the following weekend to be drug tested. So home I went because, hey, she was being kind enough to let me stay at her house for the school holidays, so it's the least I could do. Well, after I got home, she told me that she decided she wasn't going to take me to be drug tested because she thought about it. And maybe what the doctors at the ER had said was right. And it was simply the fact that I had 3 large cups of coffee on an empty stomach in less than an hour that caused me to shake for no apparent reason. But hey, while I'm here, why not have Kathy give me a whole big lecture on sex before marriage being wrong? Because my friend who drove me home had a giant hickey on her neck, and so I was the one that had to get the sex talk. A couple of weeks later, when I was out to dinner with this friend, her boyfriend, and my boyfriend, my friend told me that when she told Kathy she was coming to visit me that weekend, Kathy told her to keep an eye on Janet. My friend said, well, okay, but Janet's a good girl, to which Kathy responded, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. When I said that I'd been possibly considering seeing my father for Thanksgiving that year, that caused Kathy to yell and scream about me being ungrateful. This was not only what made me decide to find someplace else to live and what ultimately led to me moving to Tennessee, but it was also the final harsh lesson. Nothing you do is ever good enough. You'll still only be the sum of your mistakes in life. These experiences and more have affected my life, even now, 20 years on. I still struggle with cleaning because even an improvement over prior mess is a success and perfection is not necessary is still a lesson that I'm trying to learn. I struggle with not feeling guilty for taking time for myself, with being able to go and spend time alone in my room reading or playing games without worrying if I'm being a recluse, with being confident with being confident to dress the way I like to, style my hair in a way that makes me happy and not worry about what others think, to not feel like everyone has to like me or that I have to change who I am to make those around me happy. Sure, my experiences aren't the worst possible thing to have happened. There are people who have had worse experiences in foster care, who've had to move from home to home, who've struggled in a lot more. But just because others have had it worse doesn't negate the struggles that I've dealt with. It doesn't take away the traumas of being screamed at by a teacher because I didn't understand what he expected from me. It doesn't take away the negative words spoken to me, even as a joke, by a woman who was supposed to take care of me and make me feel wanted. It doesn't take away the fact that in 3.5 years, I had at least 6 caseworkers because they kept getting burnt out and moving on to other careers. I went to a home that didn't match up with my values because Kathy was one of the few places willing to take in a teenager. But that's all a topic for another day, for a talk on the history of the modern foster care system. But I'll finish with one last lesson. Be yourself, no matter who that person is. Do what makes you happy, enthusiastic, and comfortable in your own skin. Have empathy for each other and recognize that everyone has their own tastes and opinions. Take time to recharge your batteries, even if it doesn't have some grand end goal.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for sharing some very personal information. Really appreciate that. All right, with our closing, Cass and I will now read 414. As we leave this friendly place, love give light to every face. May the kindness which we learned light our hearts till we return. All right, it is 2 minutes after 11. Let's come back at 10 after. Take an 8-minute break and we'll come back for talk back. But once again, Katie, thank you very much for sharing.